Hello, my name is Emery. I was in the middle of closing a multi-million-dollar deal when I found out my grandmother had been sitting alone at a train station for 9 hours, cold, hungry, and still believing someone from our family would come. They didn't. They were all at the lake house, sipping wine, taking selfies, laughing in the sun. Not one of them mentioned her name. Not one of them looked back. And the worst part? I think they planned it that way. Why would a family go that far to erase the one person who built everything they now claim to own? Would you like to know? Friday morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my San Francisco apartment, spilling across the hardwood floors. The kettle whistled gently as I reviewed the notes for the meeting I'd spent months preparing for, something with too many zeros and too much pressure. A funding deal that could change everything for my firm. I should have been focused, and I was, for a while. Until the group chat started buzzing, it was the family thread, titled, ironically, Team Halden Forever. A name Vera, my mother, had picked years ago like some kind of badge of honor. She liked names, appearances, clean group chat titles, smiling family portraits. What she didn't like, apparently, was responsibility. The first message was from Isolde, my sister. "Mom, what time does Grandma's train get in again?" Then came Vera. "Sacramento Valley Station, 10:15 a.m. That was in less than 3 hours. I stopped stirring my tea. Leora chimed in next, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. "I can't do the pickup. I've got an interior consult at 11. I'll be out of town by then." Zinnia. "I'd love to help, but I've got the cake delivery for the party window between 9:30 and 11:30. If I leave, I lose the slot." Avon. "She can call a cab. We're not savages." I stared at the screen. There it was, casual, dismissive, soaked in entitlement. The assumption that someone else would handle it, that Grandma, Eleanor, our matriarch, was just a logistical inconvenience, not a human being, not the woman who raised 3 daughters, paid off 2 mortgages, and kept our fractured family barely tethered through decades of dysfunction. I typed slowly, controlling the urge to sound angry. Can someone please confirm they're picking her up? 3 dots bubbled, then disappeared. Nothing. My stomach tensed. I glanced at the time. 7:48 a.m. My meeting was at 10. No way I could get to Sacramento and back in time, not with Bay Area traffic and this being a Friday. And they knew that. That's why I hadn't been expected to join the Lake House reunion until Sunday. We'd agreed. We'd planned. I picked up my phone and texted Mom directly. "Just checking. You've got a plan to get Grandma, right? Her train lands soon." 2 minutes later, I got a voice note in response. I hesitated. She rarely sent voice messages. Vera preferred the curated neatness of written replies. I tapped the play button. "Oh, Emery," she said, followed by a dry chuckle. "She's fine. Don't worry so much." That was it. No plan, no name, no assurance that anyone would actually be there waiting when Grandma stepped off that train. Just that sarcastic, patronizing tone I'd known since I was 12, the one she reserved for when she thought I was overreacting. "She's fine." The same words she'd said when I came home with a split lip after a boy shoved me at summer camp. "She's fine." When Grandma was left out of the family photo at Isolde's wedding because she didn't fit the aesthetic. I held the phone in my palm, letting those words sink into the silence of my apartment. The kettle had stopped. My tea was cold. I stared at the screen a few seconds longer before locking it and placing it face down. She's fine. I could have canceled the meeting. I could have rearranged everything and driven to Sacramento myself. But I didn't, because they said they'd handle it. And I needed to believe that this time they meant it. That this time Grandma wouldn't be forgotten. I finished my tea and returned to my laptop. I had a presentation to rehearse, slides to finalize, a firm to represent. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was the youngest, the dramatic one, that I was making too much of it. But the pit in my stomach didn't agree. They all claimed to love her, especially when it suited them. When she was needed for a babysitting emergency or to lend money with no questions asked. But when it came time to pick her up from a train station, she became a burden to delegate. I remembered a Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Grandma had made her famous cranberry stuffing from scratch, spent all day in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, humming while she chopped and stirred. When she brought it to the table, Leora barely glanced up. "Oh," she said, "we already have two kinds of stuffing." Grandma smiled politely and placed the dish on the side. No one touched it. I did, because I saw her hands tremble when she served herself a spoonful, as if trying to prove it wasn't wasted. They never noticed things like that, but I did. I always did. My phone buzzed again. Another group chat message. Zinnia. Sun is perfect at the lake today. Can't wait to toast to the Halden legacy tonight. Avon. Lake looks insane. Got the jet skis prepped. Let's go. The pit in my stomach twisted harder. No mention of Grandma, no check-in to see if she'd landed, no picture of someone at the station holding a sign with her name. Nothing. They were already at the lake house. The one she helped pay for. The one they posted about like it was theirs alone. I closed the chat. I looked down at my notes, the graphs and projections suddenly a blur. Numbers swam in front of me, meaningless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped to my lap. I thought about the way Grandma used to tuck handwritten notes into my school lunchbox, even in high school. How she mailed birthday cards a week early, just in case the mail was slow. How she sat through every one of my piano recitals, even when arthritis made the wooden chairs unbearable. She's fine, they said. But she wouldn't be. I didn't know yet how bad it would get. But somewhere, in the place behind my ribs that always seemed to sense these things too early, I knew. I knew something was about to go very, very wrong. That doubt started years ago, the first time I saw them leave her behind. Not physically, not with bags packed or a door slammed in her face. It was more subtle than that. It was in the rolled eyes, the muttered complaints, the way her stories were brushed off like irrelevant static. I learned early that in our family, ignoring someone was more brutal than arguing with them. I was 19 when it finally sank in. It was Christmas, and I had just come home from my first semester of college. The tree was lit, the fire was going, and the Halden house smelled like cinnamon candles and overcooked turkey. The kind of perfect picture Vera loved to force-feed guests and followers. Grandma had spent the afternoon baking her signature gingerbread cookies, real ones, not the box-mixed junk my sister Isolde swore by. They were soft in the middle, slightly crisp at the edges, spiced just right. She brought them over in a large red tin with a velvet bow. She even added a handwritten note taped under the lid. "Merry Christmas, my darlings." I watched from the hallway as Isolde opened the tin in the kitchen. She didn't even glance at the cookies. "Why does she keep doing this?" she muttered, tossing the lid aside like it was trash. "She's getting senile." Vera stood next to her, glass of white wine in hand, nodding. "She just wants attention." Like always. Then, quieter, barely above a whisper, but loud enough for me to catch it. "I swear, sometimes I think she just keeps hanging on to make everything more complicated." I didn't make a sound. I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, while my stomach clenched. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that the twinkle in Vera's voice was sarcasm or some sick brand of humor, but it wasn't. It was fatigue, annoyance, and worst of all, honesty. That night, I found Grandma in the laundry room, quietly washing the dish towels while the party carried on upstairs. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes were distant. Not sad, just used to it. Like she'd long since stopped expecting anything different. And I hated that. I hate it now, years later, as I picture her sitting alone at the station, because of course, she would have gotten there early. Grandma was never late. Not for weddings, not for birthdays, not even for doctor's appointments that no one else bothered to attend with her. It was just past 10:30 a.m. when her train rolled into Sacramento Valley Station. I could see it in my head, how she probably waited for the crowd to clear before stepping off, dragging her little roller bag with the faded floral print, wearing that pale blue cardigan she always brought for travel days. She would have paused at the bottom of the platform ramp, scanning the crowd with a hopeful look that faded by the minute. No one was there. Not Vera, not Isolde, not Avon or Zinnia. Nobody. The waiting area at that station has these long wooden benches. They look charming in photos, but are as unforgiving as concrete. Drafts sweep in through the automatic doors every time a bus pulls up. If you sit too long, your back aches for days. I imagined her sitting there, purse clutched tightly in her lap, ticket stub still in hand, even though no one needed it anymore. It's what she always did when she was nervous. She'd keep holding the one thing she thought might anchor her to the moment. The bottle of water I knew someone offered her probably sat unopened beside her on the bench. She wouldn't have touched it. Not because she wasn't thirsty, but because she didn't want to miss anyone. What if they came and didn't see her? What if they thought she had stepped away? And the food. Maybe a sandwich in a brown paper bag from the small cafe near the terminal. Someone must have tried to be kind, seeing her sitting there. But she would have politely declined. She always said eating alone made her feel lonelier. I sat in the glass conference room of my office building, 10 floors above Market Street, staring at a PowerPoint slide I couldn't even read anymore. My team was discussing a revenue forecast, voices drifting in and out like background noise. Chloe, my assistant, glanced at me from the corner of the room, but I waved her off. I had told myself she'd be fine. I had chosen work. And now, every second that passed without confirmation, without an update from anyone, felt like a brick being stacked on my chest. I tapped my phone screen. Still no messages, no missed calls, no photos, no got her update. Just silence, just nothing. They wouldn't really forget her, right? I tried to justify it. Maybe someone was late. Maybe there'd been traffic. Sacramento wasn't exactly next door, and weekend travel was always unpredictable. Maybe someone had picked her up and just forgot to say so. My brain scrambled to rationalize, to explain away the silence as anything but what I already feared. But my heart knew better. It remembered every time Vera used the word burden when referring to Grandma. Every time Isolde laughed and said, "She lives in the past, Emery. She can't keep up anymore." Every time Avon changed the subject when Grandma's name came up during financial discussions. Every eye roll, every missed call. Every family gathering where she was left out of the conversation because she wouldn't get it anyway. I remembered all of it now. I imagined her legs stiff from the long ride. Her fingers curled from arthritis, gripping the handle of her suitcase too tightly. I imagined her checking her watch, even though the hands had probably blurred from squinting too long. And I imagined her hope, still there, still flickering, because that's who she was. She believed in the good in people, even after they'd disappointed her 100 times. She kept believing because it was easier than accepting that she didn't matter. I couldn't sit through another minute of this meeting. I rose from the chair, excused myself with a tight-lipped smile, and stepped out into the hallway. I leaned against the cool glass wall, San Francisco's skyline stretching endlessly below me. I glanced at my phone again. Still nothing. If I'd been there, I would have sat beside her, and she wouldn't have been alone on that bench. Instead, they were raising champagne glasses at the lake house. I remember that moment like someone had punched me in the chest. One of those ridiculous, overly filtered photos popped up in the group chat. Everyone in coordinated outfits on the deck, sunlight glinting off the lake behind them, smiles too wide to be real. Vera, of course, had her wine glass raised high, her signature pose. Isolde captioned it, "Hat family first." Zinnia added, "Best vibes ever." And then, clear as day, Avon commented under the post, "It's quieter without her." I froze. My thumb hovered above the screen, not knowing whether to drop the phone or throw it. They meant Grandma, obviously. Who else would they be talking about? The phrase echoed in my mind like a bell. Quiet, without her. I pushed back from the conference table, the wheels of my chair screeching lightly against the polished floor. A couple of heads turned, but I didn't care. I stood, needing air, or distance, or both. My body moved before my brain caught up. I walked out of the conference room and into the corridor where the noise of the city below could still be heard faintly through the sealed windows. I pressed my forehead to the glass, willing the cool to calm me down. They were celebrating without her. Toasting with drinks at a house she helped pay for, posing for pictures without the woman who made half of them who they were. And the worst part? They weren't even trying to hide it. A sharp buzz in my hand snapped me out of it. It wasn't the group chat this time, an unknown number. My stomach clenched, and for a second, I hesitated. Then I tapped the message open. This is Marla, a staff member at Sacramento Valley Station. Your grandmother, Eleanor Myers, is still here. She's been waiting since 10:15 a.m. No one has come to pick her up. Her phone is nearly dead. The world around me went muffled. I reread the message 3 times, hoping I was misinterpreting something. But no, it was clear. It was blunt. It was real. Grandma was still there, alone, and it was nearly 4 p.m. My fingers moved with urgency. Is she okay? Can you please stay with her? I'm trying to reach someone now. I'm in San Francisco. The reply came within seconds. She's okay, just tired, cold, she hasn't eaten. She didn't want to leave in case someone came. I sank down onto a bench just outside the office hallway, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I could barely feel my breath. My thoughts were coming in jumbled, panicked waves. They left her. They really left her, and not one of them said a word. No apology, no check-in, no "we're running late," nothing. Just champagne and hashtags and fake smiles. I pulled up the group chat again and scrolled back through the morning. Not one message about Grandma, not one comment asking if she'd arrived. No one had even thought to follow up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I reread the station worker's message, each word cutting deeper. Grandma had been sitting there for nearly 6 hours. Probably on one of those freezing benches with a stiff back and no cushion. The kind of bench that makes your spine ache and your knees throb. I could picture her, hands folded in her lap, cardigan pulled tight across her chest, eyes watching the doors, hopeful every time someone walked through. And no one came. Not a single damn one of them. I should have gone. I should have canceled the meeting. I should have never trusted them. But I had. Because I still wanted to believe, despite everything, that they'd do the right thing this time. And now? Now she was sitting in a cold train station with a dying phone and an empty stomach, still hoping someone, anyone, would walk through that door and say, "We're here." My pulse thudded in my ears. She hasn't eaten. That part made me want to put my fist through a wall. She didn't eat because she was scared of leaving her spot, scared she'd miss them, scared they'd come and leave again if she wasn't right there. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes and sat in silence for several long seconds, trying to pull myself together. The meeting inside the glass room kept going. I could see their silhouettes talking, flipping charts, pointing at graphs. I was supposed to be in there, discussing numbers with 3 venture capitalists about to fund a $26 million deal. But suddenly, none of that mattered. Because my grandmother was sitting on a cold bench, ignored, dismissed, forgotten. Not by strangers, by her family, by mine. I stood up slowly, phone still in hand, and walked back toward the glass door. Chloe, my assistant, looked at me through the pane with concern. I gave her a small shake of my head, signaling I'd explain later. I paused in front of the door, gripping the handle but not turning it. My other hand hovered over the phone. I opened the group chat again. My thumb hovered over the message icon. I wanted to blast them. I wanted to type something that would finally make them feel even a fraction of the guilt they deserved. But I didn't. Not yet. I looked down at the last photo they posted at the lake. Avon pouring wine, Zinnia flipping her hair back like a shampoo commercial, Vera with her sunglasses and smug little smirk, and in the background, the chair Grandma usually sat in. Empty. And that's when I knew I couldn't just sit here and let them do this to her again. That's when I saw the photo, every face smiling, except hers and mine. It was posted by Zinnia, of course. She had the most polished social media presence out of all of them. Her captions always sounded like they'd been copied and pasted from a Pinterest board. "Perfect day with everyone here," it read, accompanied by sparkles and hearts. I clicked on the image, letting it fill my screen. There they were, my family, lined up on the wooden deck of the lake house. Avon holding a beer with his signature smug grin, Isolde in a linen sundress she definitely bought for the aesthetic, and Vera. God, Vera with her oversized sunglasses, head tilted just right, glass of Chardonnay lifted in mid-toast. All of them laughing, sun-kissed and comfortable. But the chair where Grandma always sat? It was decorated with a throw pillow. A decorative throw pillow. Not a single word in the caption about her not being there. Not a mention of her train, her arrival, her existence. You could look at that picture and believe she never existed at all. I zoomed in slightly. Behind Vera's chair, on the small bistro table, was the photo frame Grandma had given them years ago. One of the few keepsakes she'd handed down after moving out of her house. She'd filled it with a picture of the lake house in winter, snow blanketing the deck, a note written in cursive ink tucked inside. For every season, this place has a piece of my heart. They kept the frame, but they didn't keep her. I felt a sharp ache deep in my chest. The kind that doesn't scream, it just pulses like a bruise. That empty chair was more than a forgotten spot. It was an edit, a deliberate omission, a placeholder that screamed, "She's not part of this anymore." I sat there in silence for a few seconds, just absorbing it. It wasn't the forgetting that hurt the most. It was the pretending. They weren't just ignoring Grandma. They were erasing her. I tapped out of the photo and scrolled down to the comments. Zinnia replied to someone, "Wish Emery could have made it too, but she's got her hands full with her company stuff. So proud of her." That part made me laugh. Out loud, bitterly. They weren't proud of me. They tolerated me. They tolerated me the same way they tolerated Grandma, until we got inconvenient. Until we had needs. Opinions. Boundaries. I clicked back into the group chat, still buzzing with messages. Isolda. OMG, the sunset is even better than last year. Avon. Boats gassed up, taking the twins tubing after lunch. Vera. Don't forget to bring in the cushions before it gets dewy. Not a single damn word about Grandma. I opened a new message window and typed out a direct message to Vera. Where is she now? Who was supposed to pick her up? I waited. The chat kept moving, but she didn't reply. I tapped again, sent the same message to the group. Still nothing. 3 minutes passed. 5. I watched the bubble appear for a moment, someone typing, then disappear again. Instead, Zinnia sent a new selfie of her and Isolda holding up glasses of sangria. Living our best life. That phrase. I hated it. Living your best life doesn't mean leaving your mother at a train station. Living your best life doesn't mean lying to your youngest sibling, saying you'd figure it out, then ghosting when it came time to step up. I stared at my screen so hard, my eyes began to water. My shoulders stiffened, my throat tightened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely angry. Not frustrated, not resigned, furious. I could take a lot from them. Passive-aggressive remarks, subtle digs, the constant undercutting of everything I built without their help. But this wasn't just careless. This was calculated. They made a conscious choice to act like she didn't matter, like she wasn't worth the 40-minute drive, like her existence was a noise they could mute for the weekend so they could sip sangria on the deck and pretend they were the picture-perfect family Vera always curated. And me? I'd been the idiot who believed they'd changed. I looked back at the photo one more time. That empty chair. That damn decorative pillow. Grandma would have never asked for much. A ride, a hug, a glad you're here. But they gave her none of it. And now she was sitting alone at a station, probably cold, possibly hungry, and still, hoping they'd come. That was the part that gutted me. She still believed they would come. I grabbed my keys off the table and stood. I didn't even realize how hard I'd clenched my jaw until I felt the tension in my temples. I hadn't made a plan yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here, not in this apartment, not with those messages lighting up my phone like everything was normal. Because nothing about this was normal. Before stepping out the door, I looked down at my phone one last time and typed a message into the group chat. Just so you know, she's still at the station, hasn't eaten, her phone is about to die. But hey, at least the sunset's pretty. I hit send. I could take a lot from them, but not this. 4 hours later, I was standing in front of her, and she smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. I saw her before she saw me. Sacramento Valley Station had quieted down a bit as the evening crept in. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the floor, and the usual bustle of travelers had softened to a low murmur. But there she was, still on that same bench, still clutching her purse in both hands like a life vest. Her cardigan looked even thinner now, barely shielding her from the cool air drifting through the automatic doors. And her ticket? Still in her lap, wrinkled and clutched like it meant something anymore. She turned her head as I approached, and the moment our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. Her face lit up, not with surprise, but with calm relief, like she had known, deep down, that I'd come, like I was the last part of her dignity still left intact. "I knew you'd come," she said. Not accusing, not bitter, just sure. That was the moment it broke me. Not into tears. There was no space for crying. It broke me open, into something sharp and focused. I dropped to a crouch in front of her and reached for her hand. It was cold, the kind of cold that made me furious. She should have been warm. She should have been wrapped in a fleece throw, sipping tea on a porch, not parked in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I should have been here sooner." Her smile didn't fade. "You're here now. That's all that matters." It wasn't, but I didn't argue. Her roller bag was beside her, one wheel tilted from wear. Her shoes, simple leather slip-ons, were scuffed, the backs caved in from being stepped on too quickly. I glanced at the seat next to her. A neatly folded paper bag sat untouched. Inside, a sandwich someone must have bought for her. And next to that, a bottle of water, still sealed. "You didn't eat?" I asked. She shook her head. "Didn't want to miss anyone, in case they came." I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to react. The food was there, the water was there, but she chose hunger over the fear of being forgotten again. She was afraid if she blinked too long they'd appear and disappear without her even noticing. I stood and gently took her bag handle with one hand, her elbow with the other. She leaned on me without hesitation. She was light, too light, and I could feel the stiffness in her movements as she stood. A station attendant, a young woman maybe in her early 20s, stepped over to us. "Are you family?" "Yes," I said. "She didn't want to trouble anyone," the attendant said. "Kept saying someone would be here any minute." "Thank you for staying with her," I managed. "She reminded me of my own grandma," the girl said, her eyes glancing at Grandma with a softness that made me feel even worse. "She's been so polite, so patient." I nodded, unsure what to say. Anything I said would only feel like an excuse, and I had none. Grandma didn't say a word as we exited the station. The sky had turned a dusky lavender, the last edge of daylight slipping behind the trees. I helped her into the passenger seat of my car and buckled her in gently, like she used to do for me when I was little. As I closed the door, I paused a second just to look at her. She was so small in that seat, so quiet, so trusting. When I got in behind the wheel, I didn't start the car right away. I just sat there, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. She was looking out the window, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just spent her day being erased. "Do you want to go to the house?" I asked. She looked over at me. "Yours?" I nodded. She smiled again. "Yes, that sounds nice." And just like that, it was decided. I pulled away from the station slowly, the soft hum of tires on asphalt, the only sound between us. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't speak. I just drove. It was nearly 2 hours back to San Francisco. She dozed off halfway through, her head tilted slightly toward the window, fingers still interlocked in her lap. Every now and then, she'd twitch like she was dreaming. I wondered if it was about the lake house, about the porch swing, about her 3 children who couldn't be bothered to drive 40 miles. By the time we reached my apartment, it was fully dark. I helped her upstairs, offered her the shower first, and while she cleaned up, I made her tea. I knew how she liked it, black with 2 teaspoons of honey. I set out an old blanket on the couch and fluffed the pillows, though I already knew I'd be giving her my bed that night. When she stepped out of the bathroom, hair still damp, she looked years younger somehow, like shedding the station had peeled a weight off her. I handed her the tea and walked her to the bedroom. She turned to me at the door and whispered, "Thank you." I shook my head. "This won't happen again." She nodded, and I meant it. I stood in the hallway after she closed the door and exhaled a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding all day. They left her, but I wouldn't. Not again. I walked to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and opened the group chat again. I stared at the screen, messages still trickling in, photos of dinner, the lake at sunset, Isolde's kids roasting marshmallows. I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't going to tell them off. Not yet. I had something better in mind. The station attendant caught my arm before we left, as if she needed me to understand just how long Grandma had been waiting. She was maybe in her early 20s, nervous-looking, but sincere. Her name tag read Marla. I remembered her face from earlier. She was the one who had brought over a blanket when Grandma started shivering. "Can I tell you something?" she asked, glancing back toward the empty bench where Grandma had been sitting just moments before. I nodded. She stood up every time the doors opened. Every single time. Like clockwork. Her voice cracked a little as she said it. I felt the air catch in my lungs. She'd look at every face that came through like she was sure one of them had to be for her. And when they weren't... Marla shook her head. She just sat back down, waited a bit, and then did it again when the next train came in. She asked me the time at least a dozen times, but always with a smile, like she didn't want to seem like a bother. There was a silence between us, heavy and unspoken. She kept saying, "They'll be here any minute." I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing my lips together until the pressure passed. Thanking her felt too small. Apologizing on behalf of my family felt even smaller. So instead, I nodded once, placed a hand on her arm, and whispered, "You did the right thing texting me." Marla smiled a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. I could tell the image of Grandma sitting on that bench was going to stay with her for a long time. It was going to stay with me longer. Once we got home, I helped Grandma out of the car, guided her up the front steps to my apartment building, and let her lean on me the entire elevator ride to my floor. She didn't speak, and neither did I. Sometimes the silence says everything. Inside, I got her settled on the couch with a blanket draped over her knees and her teacup gently warmed in the microwave. She sat with it between her hands, gazing down as if the steam held something she hadn't quite figured out how to say. "I really am fine, you know," she said eventually, glancing up at me with that tired smile. "I know you are," I replied. "But you shouldn't have had to be." She didn't answer that. Later, after I'd tucked her into my bed and pulled the door mostly shut, I sat down with my laptop to send out a few emails, one to cancel a meeting, another to reschedule a pitch. I wasn't going to Tahoe anymore. I didn't even feel like I was part of that family this weekend. As I passed by the coat rack, I grabbed her cardigan to hang up. That's when I noticed it. The deep blue bruise along her forearm, just above the wrist. It was fading into a sickly yellow at the edges. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure how I hadn't seen it earlier. The fabric must have hidden it until now. I brought the cardigan closer, checking for any tears or dirt, but it was clean. The bruise, though, that wasn't from a fall or one mistake. It was from repetition, force against the same spot, over and over again. The next morning, I asked her casually over breakfast. "Your arm," I said gently. "What happened?" She looked at the bruise and blinked like she'd forgotten it was even there. Then she shrugged. "Oh, that? I kept bumping into the bench every time I stood up to look at the door. Silly, really. Why didn't you tell anyone?" She gave a faint laugh. Didn't seem important. Didn't seem important. That sentence stuck to my ribs like glue. A bruise from standing up too many times, just to check if someone cared enough to come. That was the kind of hurt my family didn't even believe in. Quiet pain, soft disappointment, wounds you couldn't post a selfie next to. I went into the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and gripped the edges of the sink. They had done this. They might not have struck her, but they left her there to wear herself down, to weight herself into exhaustion, into soreness. They left her with no coat, no food, no reassurance. Just hope. Hope so stubborn she kept standing up long after it stopped making sense. And the bruise? That was proof. Proof of all the times they said, "She's fine." Proof of every time they treated her like a prop, something that belonged in their lives only when convenient. I didn't need an apology anymore. I needed the truth to come out. That evening, after Grandma had dozed off again, I opened my laptop and started gathering everything. The photo Zinnia had posted from the lake house, with that empty chair. The timestamp of the station worker's first message to me. A screen capture of the unanswered text I'd sent to the group asking who was supposed to pick her up. And I took a picture. Not of Grandma, not in her sleep. That felt wrong. But I took a photo of the bruise on her arm, just close enough to see the coloring. Just real enough to remind them this wasn't some dramatic overreaction, this was their doing. I uploaded it all into a folder, named it Truth. I wasn't ready to send it, not yet. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want them dragged publicly, at least not yet. But I wanted to be ready. I wanted them to see, someday, the evidence, to have to face the version of events they worked so hard to pretend didn't exist. And if they wanted to pretend this never happened, I was going to make sure the whole world remembered it. By the next morning, her face was everywhere, and none of them could hide from it. It started quietly, with a post from a woman named Trina, someone I didn't know, but instantly respected. She'd been at the station that day. While I was still arguing with myself in a boardroom about whether to walk away from a multi-million-dollar deal, Trina was watching my grandmother sit silently, hands folded over her purse, eyes trained on the doors with that same tired hope she always carried. The photo she posted wasn't flashy, it wasn't staged, it was raw, candid. Grandma on the bench, that pale blue cardigan buttoned up all the way to her neck, the purse on her lap, the water bottle unopened by her side. Her lips were pressed together like she was trying to keep her emotions inside, and her feet barely touched the floor. The caption was simple. This sweet lady has been sitting here for hours waiting for her ride. Says her family is coming. I really hope they are. She reminds me of my Nana. By 9 a.m., it had over 12,000 shares. By noon, a local news outlet had picked it up. The station had been tagged in the comments. Then the city's public transportation account. Then hashtags started forming. Had not family. First, had she deserved better. No one came. That's when the messages started flooding in. People were offering to pick her up, asking if she needed a meal, a ride, a blanket. Others were tagging friends, asking if they recognized her. Some assumed she was abandoned. Some assumed she had dementia. Some assumed she was homeless. But no one, not one of them, assumed that her own family had chosen not to come. The hardest part to read. She looked so dignified, even sitting there like that, like she's holding on to some hope, even if it's been taken away from her. That comment nearly broke me. I hadn't even shared anything yet. I hadn't uploaded the bruise. I hadn't posted the group chat screenshots. I hadn't said a word. But I didn't have to, because the world was already seeing her, the way she deserved to be seen. I stood in the kitchen that morning, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, scrolling through hundreds of comments, tears threatening to spill over, but never quite falling. I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious, not in the uncontrollable, shout-at-the-wall way. It was colder than that, sharper, like I'd been holding a knife back for too long, and now it finally fit in my grip. I opened the family group chat, still going strong. Avon had posted a picture of the lake at sunrise. God, this place clears my head, Isolde replied with a meme, a woman sipping coffee, and the caption, vacation mode, activated. And then, like she hadn't seen a single post or news article or viral thread, or maybe she had and just didn't care, Isolde typed, let's not make a big deal out of this, she's fine. That was it. That was her response. Not, I'm sorry. Not, how is she now? Not even a lie. Just that smug, dismissive little text. She's fine. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Zinnia chimed in a few minutes later. I think Emery's blowing this out of proportion. It was a miscommunication. We all thought someone else had it. Then Vera, finally Vera, sent her first message since I'd rescued Grandma. I assumed someone would grab her. If I'd known no one was going, I would have left early. Don't turn this into something it's not. Turn this into something it's not. She was the one who'd said, we'll figure it out, in the group chat. The one who sent me a thumbs-up emoji when I'd asked if Grandma was covered. And now she was playing the victim? A part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to walk away. But a third part, the strongest part, smiled. Because I didn't have to say anything. The world was already doing the talking. I'd received 3 DMs from reporters asking if the woman in the photo was a relative. One of them had already figured out her name from a train manifest. Another said the city council might be using the image in a campaign on elder neglect. Strangers, absolute strangers, had offered more dignity in 12 hours than her own children had in a decade, and yet my family was still pretending they hadn't done anything wrong. I opened the folder I'd created the night before, the one labeled Truth. I uploaded the photo of the bruise. I added the station worker's text. I dropped in the screenshot of the unanswered message. I recorded a short voice memo, just the sound of Grandma saying, "I knew you'd come." Then I closed my laptop and sat back. I wasn't going to release it, not yet. I wanted them to sweat, to guess, to wonder if I would. The public might have already passed judgment, but the real verdict was mine to deliver. They'd already been judged by the court of public opinion. Now it was my turn. The envelope had been in her purse the whole time, and it was about to end every excuse they had. It was early, barely 7 a.m., and the apartment was still wrapped in that soft morning hush. Grandma sat in the armchair near the window, wrapped in one of my old blankets, sipping tea and flipping through the crossword section of a paper I'd picked up the night before. She looked rested, but there was still something about the way she clutched the mug, like her fingers were holding on to more than just warmth. I crouched by her suitcase, unpacking slowly, neatly folding cardigans and cotton blouses and placing them in a drawer I'd cleared out for her. At the bottom of the case, tucked beneath an extra pair of orthopedic shoes, was a small notebook. Hardcover, spiral-bound. Something about it felt personal, so I didn't open it right away. I brought it to her instead. "Is this yours?" She looked at it, then smiled faintly. "Oh yes. Been meaning to update that." She took it, opened the cover with care, and slipped out a thick envelope from inside the front page. Her fingers ran across the seal like she was smoothing out a wrinkle in time. "I wrote this a few years ago, meant to revise it again before the summer. But, well, things slipped." I sat down across from her. "What is it?" "My will." She said it so casually, like she was reading off a grocery list. But something in her voice shifted when she handed it to me. "It names you," she said quietly. I blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "There's still a portion for your mother and the others. I couldn't cut them out completely. But the majority, I left for you." "Why?" The word came out sharper than I meant it to. Grandma took a sip of tea before answering. "Because you see me, Emery. You always have, even when they treated me like wallpaper." I didn't know what to say. I opened the envelope gently. The document was clean, typed, notarized. The language was straightforward, with clear allocation of funds, assets, and property. And there, as promised, my name was listed first. Not just a token gift or a sentimental heirloom. This was real. A majority share of her estate, including the trust tied to the lake house. And suddenly, everything made sense. The vague responses in the family group chat, the deflections, the way no one could make it to the station, they hadn't just forgotten her. They'd intentionally kept her away, kept her from the house, from the gathering, from the chance to say anything. They knew about this will, or at the very least they suspected. I sat back against the couch cushions and let the truth settle over me like dust. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't miscommunication. It was strategy. A calculated, deliberate act of exclusion. They didn't want her to be there, not because she'd say something embarrassing, but because she'd say something true, something binding. They didn't want the guests to hear it. They didn't want Grandma to remember how much she still had power. And worst of all, they didn't want me to know. That afternoon, while Grandma napped, I sat at the dining table with her notebook, her will, and my phone. I opened the group chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse. They were experts at twisting tone, at calling me emotional, dramatic, unstable. So I kept it clean, direct, and devastating. I attached a photo of the will, cropped to show the date, the official seal, and the line with my name on it. Then I typed, For the record, this is what you were trying to keep her from bringing to the lake house, and this is why none of you showed up. I hit send. Then I waited. The first notification popped up less than a minute later. Avon, can we talk privately about this? This isn't the place for that. Right, now it wasn't the place. Funny how the group chat was the perfect place for boat photos and steak dinners and jokes about vacation mode, but not for truth. Isolde, you're twisting things. You always do this, making us out to be villains. Zinnia liked her comment. Then Vera responded. A single message. I don't know what you think you're doing, Emery. That was it. Not, that's not real. Not, we didn't know. Not, she's fine. Just that cold, clipped sentence that said everything she didn't have the courage to admit aloud. I stared at my screen, feeling my pulse slow, not speed up. I expected rage. I expected chaos. Instead, what I felt was clarity. They weren't going to fight me with facts, because they didn't have any. They'd fight with guilt trips, with denial, with silence. But the truth was already out. The notifications slowed. No one else said a word. I stood up, walked into Grandma's room, and sat on the edge of the bed. She stirred, opened one eye, then smiled. Did you do it? She asked. I nodded. I did. She reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. Good, she said. They need to be reminded who I am. And who I am. By the time I hit send, it wasn't just my grandmother they had to answer to anymore. 6 months later, I watched her settle into her new room, and watched them lose everything they'd schemed for. Jed, it was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the sun filtered through the blinds just enough to warm the space without making it stuffy. Grandma's chair, the one we'd found at an antique shop in Pacific Heights, sat by the window, angled just right to catch the light but not the glare. A small table stood beside it, already holding her crossword book, reading glasses, and a ceramic mug that read, Best Nana Ever, in faded lettering. I'd had the apartment renovated back in January, took out the divider between the kitchen and living room to make space for her favorite rocker, swapped out my glass dining table for a round wooden one she could lean on without worrying it would tip. The biggest change wasn't physical, though. It was the feeling. The stillness was no longer empty. It was shared. Our mornings had found a rhythm. Tea, toast, a walk around the block if her knees felt up to it. Some days we'd sit on a bench in Alta Plaza Park and just people watch. She liked to guess strangers' stories. He's on his way to apologize, she'd whisper, pointing with her chin. He's bringing flowers, but they're the wrong kind. I'd laugh, not because her guesses were always funny, they weren't, but because she noticed, she observed, she paid attention, unlike them. Vera hadn't called since the day I sent the will. Isolde tried, once, a one-line email asking if Grandma was in good spirits, followed by a tone-deaf invitation to her daughter's birthday party in April. Avon had gone quiet. I heard from someone else that he was fighting with his financial advisor. Something about a trust he expected to access suddenly being unavailable. Zinnia had, in the most ironic twist of all, posted a long message about learning to prioritize family and the importance of respecting our elders. Comments were turned off. The lake house was listed 3 weeks after Grandma passed. I hadn't been back there. I didn't need to. The photos told me everything I needed to know. The listing featured the usual: high ceilings, lake view, gourmet kitchen, fire pit out back. But what caught my eye wasn't the amenities, it was the dining table. That table had once hosted birthdays, graduations, holidays, arguments, secrets, smiles so forced you could hear the teeth grinding behind them. And now, in the real estate photos, it was empty, staged, a bowl of green apples and not a single chair pulled out, sterile, silent, sold. After Grandma died, the will was executed exactly as written. The estate, the accounts, the residual assets, they all came to me. I didn't contest it. I didn't need to. There was no room for debate when everything was signed and sealed by her own hand. I kept what mattered, not the money, not the house, not the family name or some manufactured legacy. I kept the books she loved, the recipes she never needed to write down, and the necklace she wore to every single one of my piano recitals. I kept the quiet way she'd pat my hand when I was angry and didn't know what to do with it. And I kept her name, Eleanor, in my email signature, right beneath mine, when I started a community foundation in her honor. The others weren't mentioned in the legal process beyond a formal notification of disinheritance. There were no fights, no appeals, just silence. I suppose, in the end, they knew, and maybe they were embarrassed. Or maybe they just didn't care enough to try. Either way, it no longer mattered. What mattered was that she spent her last months being seen, being heard. She didn't sit on cold benches anymore. She sat in her rocker, with sunlight warming her knees, in a room filled with the sound of real laughter. The day she passed, I was reading to her. She'd fallen asleep during a chapter from the book she used to read me as a child, Anne of Green Gables. She didn't wake up. There was no pain, no drama, just peace. I held her hand until the nurse arrived. I packed her things gently, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Her scarf still smelled like lavender. At her service, there was no grand show, no speeches from relatives who hadn't called in years, just me and a few neighbors and some friends she'd made at the park. One woman brought a cake Grandma had taught her how to bake. We sang quietly, we laughed louder, and afterward we toasted with teacups, not champagne. Later that night, I sat at my own dining table. Mine wasn't polished to a showroom shine. It had rings from mugs and scratches from grocery bags dragged too hard. It wasn't picture perfect, but it was real. I poured myself a glass of wine, not because I was celebrating, but because I was grateful. Grateful that I'd walked out of that meeting, grateful that I hadn't let their silence become mine. Grateful that she'd known, when no one else showed up, that I would. They toasted without her once, but the last toast was mine. Sometimes, it's not the loud betrayals that leave the deepest scars. It's the quiet ones. The missed calls, the empty chairs, the silence when someone needed to be seen. This story isn't just about one forgotten grandmother. It's about what happens when we stop showing up for the people who once built our lives brick by brick. So let me ask you, who in your life deserves more than they've been given? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more real stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. I never thought my own home would become a battlefield. But the moment my husband looked me in the eye and said, "Mike and Laura are moving into our bedroom," I knew my place in this house was never mine to begin with. I'm Hannah, and for years, I built a life with Ryan, only to realize I was just a provider, not a partner. My money, his to spend, my space, his to give away. And when I finally said enough, that's when everything spiraled out of control. I walked into my bedroom, but it wasn't mine anymore. My husband stood there, tossing my things into boxes like I was just another piece of furniture being moved out of the way. That was the moment I knew I wasn't his wife. I was just an obligation he no longer cared to respect. And what happened next changed everything. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:45 a.m., but I had already been awake for an hour. Sleep had become a rare luxury, and my mind constantly raced with deadlines, unfinished projects, and the weight of running a household practically on my own. I pulled the sheets off, moving carefully to avoid disturbing Ryan. He had stayed up late watching TV in the living room again, his usual routine ever since he lost his job. I slipped into my robe and padded down the hallway, heading straight to the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, but the warmth of it did nothing to ease the tension in my chest. Today was a big day. I had a presentation with a high-profile client at the firm, one that could elevate my career if it went well. I grabbed my phone from the counter and instinctively checked my bank account, a habit that had become second nature since Ryan started treating our joint finances as his personal playground. My breath caught in my throat. A $5,000 withdrawal. I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to change, to be some kind of error. But there it was, a gaping hole in our savings, money I had meticulously put aside for bills, emergencies, and for the simple reassurance that I had control over at least one thing in my life. My fingers clenched around the phone as I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Ryan strolled into the kitchen, stretching his arms as if he had just awoken from the best sleep of his life. He yawned, rubbing his jaw, then grabbed a mug from the cupboard and poured himself coffee. "Morning," he mumbled, not even sparing me a glance. I tightened my grip on my phone. "Did you take $5,000 from our account?" Ryan took a slow sip of coffee, his expression unreadable. "I invested it." He leaned against the counter, completely at ease. "Don't worry, you make good money." I stared at him in disbelief. "You invested it?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. He finally met my gaze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah, a business opportunity came up. Look, it's gonna double in no time." I let out a breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You can't just take money like that, Ryan. We're supposed to discuss these things." Ryan sighed heavily, as if I were an inconvenience. "You act like we're broke, Hannah. You pull in 10 grand a month, and I've been out of work. Yeah, but I'm making moves." I set my phone down carefully, my hands shaking from frustration. "This isn't about the amount. It's about the fact that you didn't even ask me. You don't get to just take money from our savings without talking to me." He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, you're dramatic. It's just money, Hannah. You'll make more." The sheer audacity of his words sent a chill through me. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this, but every time I pushed back, he treated me like I was overreacting, like my concerns were invalid. I had been working myself to exhaustion, sacrificing weekends, skipping vacations, just to keep our household afloat, and he dismissed it like it was nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Put it back, Ryan," he scoffed. "It's already tied up. Relax, I know what I'm doing." I clenched my jaw, knowing this conversation was going nowhere. Pushing further would only lead to another fight, and I couldn't afford that. Not today, not with my presentation looming over me. I turned away, willing myself to focus on something else, anything else. But then his voice came again, casual, almost an afterthought. "Oh, by the way, Mike and Laura are moving in." I froze. I turned back to face him slowly. "What?" He took another sip of coffee. "My brother and Laura, they need a place to stay for a while, so they're moving in." I blinked, struggling to process what I was hearing. "For how long?" Ryan shrugged, unconcerned. "No idea, but they'll take our bedroom." I let out a sharp laugh, not out of amusement, but out of sheer disbelief. "Our bedroom?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Are you kidding me?" He finally looked up, his expression hardening. "They need space. The guest room's too small. It just makes sense." It just makes sense. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. This was my home. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. I worked to keep this roof over our heads. And now, not only was my opinion ignored, but I was being shoved aside. Again. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Ryan, this is my home. I deserve a say in this." His jaw tightened. "This is my home, too." I swallowed back the sharp words threatening to spill out. "And where am I supposed to sleep?" Ryan was already walking away. I pulled into the driveway, just as the last rays of sunlight stretched across the pavement. The weight of the day clung to me, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. All I wanted was a hot shower, a quiet meal, and the comfort of my own bed. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Suitcases lined the hallway, their bulky frames blocking the path to the stairs. Voices carried from the second floor, familiar but unwelcome. I hurried up, my pulse quickening. When I reached the master bedroom, my stomach twisted. Mike and Laura were inside, their belongings spilling onto my bed. Laura unzipped a suitcase, casually pulling out folded clothes, while Mike tossed a duffel bag onto the dresser. They moved with the ease of people settling into a space they had every right to occupy. My space. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, Watching me like this was just another normal evening. I turned to him, struggling to keep my voice steady. We didn't talk about this. I live here too. Ryan smirked, unfazed. You'll manage. I clenched my fists. Where am I supposed to sleep? Ryan pushed off the doorframe, strolling past me into the hallway. He gestured vaguely toward the living room downstairs. You can take the couch. I let out a breath, trying to process what was happening. The couch? My voice came out sharp, disbelief cutting through the exhaustion. Ryan shrugged. It's temporary. Don't make a big deal out of it. I looked back at the bedroom. My nightstand was gone, my books stacked carelessly in boxes. The framed picture of my parents that once sat beside my bed was now wedged between a pile of folded sheets. This wasn't temporary. I turned back to Ryan. You didn't even ask me. His eyes darkened. I don't have to ask you, Hannah. This is my family. They needed a place. End of story. I swallowed hard. End of story? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike and Laura didn't even glance up, pretending not to hear the conversation happening just feet away from them. The injustice of it all burned in my chest. I was the one keeping this house afloat, the one sacrificing nights, weekends, my sanity just to make sure we could afford to live here. And now, I wasn't even allowed the dignity of my own space. I took a step toward Ryan. No, I said firmly. This is not okay. Ryan's jaw tensed. You're overreacting. I shook my head, the realization settling like a heavy weight in my stomach. I wasn't a wife. I was an afterthought. The final confirmation came when I reached into my pocket for my phone. If he wouldn't listen to reason, maybe Emily would. Maybe I could stay with her for a few nights, clear my head. Before I could unlock the screen, Ryan's hand shot out, snatching the phone from my grasp. You're not calling anyone, he said flatly. My heart pounded. Give it back. Ryan held the phone just out of reach, his grip tightening. We're not doing this tonight, he muttered. You're tired. Just go downstairs. I stood there, frozen. For years I had bent, compromised, sacrificed, and now I had nothing left. I turned on my heel and walked out without another word. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My breath came in uneven gasps, my chest rising and falling with the effort of holding back the wave of emotions threatening to break free. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the pavement, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I unlocked my phone and pressed Emily's number. She answered on the second ring. Hannah, what's wrong? Her voice was sharp with concern, and that was all it took. The knot in my throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Hannah? I need to see you, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Where are you? I swallowed, trying to steady myself. The Magnolia Cafe. I'm on my way. Stay there. The call ended, leaving me alone with the deafening silence of my car. 15 minutes later, Emily slid into the seat across from me at our usual corner booth. She studied me carefully, her sharp eyes scanning my face as if trying to piece together what had happened before I could even say the words. I stared down at my coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ryan is taking everything from me, I whispered. Even my bedroom. Emily set her cup down with a quiet thud. You need to get out of there. I let out a shaky breath, the weight of her words pressing against the part of me that still hesitated. But where would I go? With me, she said without hesitation. You're not going back there. I lifted my gaze to meet hers, searching for reassurance, for something to ground me. Emily had always been the strong one, the one who never let anyone push her around. I used to be like that once, didn't I? My phone vibrated on the table, breaking the moment. The screen lit up with Ryan's name. Where are you? Come home now. Emily snatched the phone before I could react. She stared at the screen, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, with a decisive movement, she blocked the number. You don't owe him anything, she said firmly, sliding the phone back toward me. I exhaled slowly, the finality of her action settling over me. For the first time, I saw my life for what it had become. Trapped, suffocating, controlled. I straightened my shoulders. I'm leaving. Emily's expression softened, a hint of relief crossing her face. Good, she said. Let's go. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I zipped up my overnight bag, my hands trembling with every movement. My heart pounded against my ribs as I scanned the room one last time, making sure I had everything I needed. The bedroom felt foreign now, stripped of warmth, stripped of any sense of belonging. Just as I reached for the door handle, Ryan's voice cut through the silence. "Where do you think you're going?" I froze. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that sent a warning down my spine. I turned slowly to see him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was blocking my way, his presence filling the space between us, turning the already stifling room into something unbearable. "I'm staying with Emily tonight." I forced my voice to stay steady, but the air between us thickened as the words settled. Ryan let out a low, humorless laugh, stepping forward. "That's not happening." I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. "This isn't up for discussion," I said, lifting my chin. He took another step closer. "You think you can just walk out?" His tone was incredulous, as if I had suggested something impossible. "This is your home. I'm your husband." His words twisted in my gut, but I didn't back down. "My home?" I gestured around the room, my frustration spilling over. "You gave it away. You didn't even ask me. You don't ask me about anything anymore." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Mike and Laura needed help. We're family." I shook my head, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Family doesn't treat each other like this." He scoffed, his face hardening. "You belong here, Hannah. You're my wife." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not as a statement of love, but as a declaration of ownership. I swallowed hard. "No, Ryan." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they carried a weight I had never allowed myself to hold before. "I don't belong to you, and I'm leaving." I tried to push past him, but his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist. His grip was tight, his knuckles white. "You're not going anywhere." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Yes, I am." I yanked my arm free, my skin burning from where his fingers had been. For a second, I thought he might grab me again, that he might do something worse. His fists clenched at his sides, his body tense, but he didn't move. Instead, he took a step back and exhaled sharply through his nose. "If you walk out that door, don't come back." I hesitated, not because I wanted to stay, not because I doubted my decision, but because I knew, in that moment, that this was it, the final breaking point. I reached for the doorknob. Ryan didn't try to stop me this time. I stepped out into the hallway, my breath shallow, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The air felt different outside the bedroom, lighter, even though the weight of years still clung to me. I descended the stairs quickly, not trusting myself to linger. My hands shook as I unlocked the front door, stepping into the cold night air. I half expected him to come after me, to grab my arm again, to say something to pull me back in. But when I turned to glance over my shoulder, he was still standing in the bedroom doorway, watching. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys. My fingers were clumsy, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. I forced myself to focus, to start the engine, to drive. The house shrank in my rearview mirror, and Ryan was still standing there. I didn't stop driving until I reached Emily's apartment. The moment I stepped inside, she pulled me into a tight hug, her arms wrapping around me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "You did it," she whispered. "You're safe now." Relief flooded through me, but beneath it was something else, something sharp, something lingering, because I knew this wasn't over. I stared into the swirling steam rising from my tea, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic mug, but the chill in my chest refused to fade. My whole body still trembled, the adrenaline from my escape wearing off, but leaving behind exhaustion and uncertainty. Emily sat across from me at her small dining table, her apartment filled with the familiar scent of vanilla candles and fresh coffee. It should have been comforting, but all I felt was the gnawing sense of unease. Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "You're safe now," she said, her voice steady. "But Ryan won't just let this go, will he?" I swallowed hard. "No," I admitted. "He won't." The weight of that truth pressed down on me. Ryan had always gotten his way, always dismissed my concerns, always expected me to bend. The idea of him simply accepting that I had left felt impossible. Emily leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Then we have to be smart about this." She stood, grabbed her laptop from the counter, and flipped it open. "You need to talk to a lawyer." The words made my stomach twist. I had thought about leaving before. I had imagined what life could be like without him. But actually, taking the steps to make it real, to end this marriage legally, felt overwhelming. "Divorce," I murmured, the word foreign on my tongue. "I never thought I'd be doing this." Emily's eyes softened. "You deserve better, Hannah. And you don't have to do this alone." I took a shaky breath and nodded. We searched for attorneys in the area, scrolling through profiles and reading reviews. My hands felt cold as I scrolled past law firms specializing in domestic cases, the reality of my situation pressing into me with every click. Emily didn't hesitate. She clicked on a name, dialed the number, and handed me the phone. It rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. "Lisa Grant, Family Law. How can I help?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Hi, I need to file for divorce," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a brief pause before Lisa's voice came back, firm but kind. "All right. Why don't you tell me a little about your situation?" I exhaled, forcing myself to speak. As I explained, Lisa listened, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. She didn't sound surprised by any of it. That, more than anything, made me realize how common stories like mine must be. When the call ended, I placed the phone on the table, my hands shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else. I was doing this. I was really leaving him. Emily smiled at me, pride shining in her eyes. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. "Ryan." I didn't want to look, but my hands moved on their own. The screen glowed with a series of messages. "Come home now. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." I inhaled sharply, my stomach twisting. Emily snatched the phone before I could react. She read the messages, her expression darkening. Then, without a word, she blocked the number and set the phone down. "No more, Hannah," she said, her voice unwavering. "He doesn't get to control you anymore." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Lisa's words echoed in my mind. "The first thing tomorrow, we'll file for a restraining order." For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. I turned to Emily, gripping her hand tightly. "I'm really doing this," I whispered. "I'm really leaving him." She squeezed my hand. "Yes," she said. "You are." And for the first time, I believed it. Bang, bang, bang! I shot upright, my breath catching in my throat. My pulse pounded in my ears as I tried to orient myself in the darkness. It took a second for the haze of sleep to clear, for me to remember where I was. Emily's apartment. Safe. Away from Ryan. Or at least, I had thought so. Another loud bang shook the front door. I scrambled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Emily was already in the hallway, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She pressed a finger to her lips, then tiptoed toward the door, peering through the peephole. She inhaled sharply. "It's Ryan," she whispered. My stomach twisted into knots. Another pound against the door. Then his voice, thick with anger, and something else. Alcohol. "Hannah, open the door! We need to talk!" Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. I'm calling the cops, she murmured, stepping back. No, I whispered, shaking my head, my body frozen. I knew calling the police was the right thing to do. I knew it. But fear paralyzed me, wrapped itself around my chest, squeezing tight. Ryan's voice turned sharp, almost pleading. Hannah, come on, don't be like this. Just let me in. We can fix this. I clenched my jaw. Fix this? After everything? Emily's thumb hovered over the call button. This is your call, she said quietly. I hesitated. Then Ryan's voice changed. You think you can just walk away from me? His tone was darker now, all softness gone. You think you can leave me, and I'll just let it happen? My breath came in short, shallow gasps. He pounded the door again. You'll regret this, Hannah. You'll see. Emily pressed the call button. The seconds stretched out like hours as we stood frozen, waiting. My hands balled into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I had spent years making excuses for Ryan, convincing myself that he would never hurt me. But this was different. The faint wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the silence of the night. Red and blue lights flooded the apartment through the curtains. The pounding stopped. Ryan stumbled back, his silhouette barely visible in the glow of the flashing lights. I could see him standing there, his hands clenched at his sides, his body vibrating with barely contained rage. Cops? His voice was thick with disbelief. You called the cops on me? Emily didn't answer. The officers moved in quickly. I couldn't make out their words, but I heard Ryan's angry protests, saw the way his body tensed. My hands trembled as I wrapped my arms around myself. Emily pulled me away from the door, her voice low and steady. It's over, Hannah. But I wasn't sure I believed that. The next morning, I sat across from Lisa Grant, my hands resting on the cool surface of her desk. A stack of papers lay in front of me. The words blurred together, but I already knew what they said. Restraining order. Lisa pushed a pen toward me. This will keep him away, she said. But you need to be prepared. Men like Ryan don't give up easily. I picked up the pen, my fingers curling around it. For years, I had let Ryan control me. Let him dictate my choices, my thoughts, my life. But not anymore. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. I'm ready to fight for my freedom, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. My phone buzzed against the table, the vibration rattling against the wood. I stared at the unknown number flashing on the screen, my pulse quickening. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. I hesitated before swiping to accept. Hannah? The voice was familiar, though strained, as if forced through years of bitterness and exhaustion. It's Linda, Ryan's mother. We need to talk. I sat frozen, gripping the phone tightly. The last time I had spoken to Linda had been at a family gathering months ago, before things had spiraled. She had always been polite, distant, never fully acknowledging the cracks in her son's behavior. What do you want? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Linda sighed. Can we meet? I hesitated, then glanced over at Emily, who was pouring herself another cup of coffee in the kitchen. She raised an eyebrow at my expression. Where? There's a coffee shop on 6th, Linda said. Nothing dramatic. I need to talk to you. I should have said no. Every instinct screamed that I owed this woman nothing, but curiosity won. An hour later, I sat across from her in a quiet corner of a cafe, the smell of roasted beans thick in the air. Linda looked tired. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee, her eyes avoiding mine. Ryan's not handling things well, she said finally. He's falling apart. I clenched my jaw. That's not my problem anymore. She sighed, rubbing at her temple. I know you think that, but he's my son, Hannah. I folded my arms. And he was my husband. And yet, here we are. Linda exhaled slowly. He needs help. Maybe if you talk to him. I set my cup down hard enough that the liquid inside rippled. No. Her eyes met mine for the first time, searching, pleading. He's drinking more. He's not eating. He lost his job. He... I shook my head. He made his choices, Linda. I'm not responsible for him anymore. She swallowed hard, then looked down at her hands. She trailed off, then sighed. When she looked up again, something in her expression had changed. I'm just saying, desperate people do desperate things. My stomach twisted. Was that a warning? I asked, my voice low. Linda gave a small shake of her head, her mouth pressed into a tight line. She didn't say anything else as she stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the cafe. I sat there, gripping the table edge, my mind racing. Was she warning me or threatening me? I fumbled for my phone and dialed Emily's number. She picked up on the second ring. I think Ryan's getting worse, I whispered. We need to be careful. That night, I checked the locks on every door and window in Emily's apartment. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel safe. The apartment door creaked as I stepped outside. Fresh air filled my lungs, but the momentary relief vanished as my eyes landed on the small object resting against the doorstep, a single red rose. My breath hitched. My pulse pounded in my ears. A small note was tied to the stem with a thin ribbon. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper. You were always beautiful when you were mine. My stomach twisted. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ryan. I swallowed hard, glancing around the quiet apartment complex. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars. The streetlights flickered dimly. My skin prickled, the overwhelming sensation of being watched crawling over me like a second skin. I backed up, stepping inside and locking the door. Emily stood in the kitchen, stirring a cup of tea. When she saw my face, she set the mug down immediately. Hannah, what's wrong? Wordlessly, I held up the note. Her expression darkened as she snatched it from my hand, reading the words. Her jaw tightened. That's it. We're calling the police. I hesitated. I knew Ryan was pushing boundaries. I knew this wasn't normal. But part of me, the part still conditioned to second-guess everything, whispered. Maybe I was overreacting. Emily didn't wait for me to decide. She grabbed her phone, her voice sharp as she spoke into the receiver. Yes, we need an officer to come by. Restraining order violation. An hour later, Detective Martinez stood in the living room, flipping through his notebook. He was in his early 40s, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that came from dealing with situations like these too often. He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Technically, he hasn't broken the restraining order yet. He hasn't physically approached you. I clenched my fists. So I have to wait for him to actually hurt me before you can do something? Martinez's gaze softened slightly. No, but there's a process. We can document this, increase patrols near the apartment, but right now, all we can do is be cautious. Cautious. I wasn't sure how much longer I could live like this. Emily crossed her arms. And where is Ryan now? Martinez checked his phone. A frown creased his forehead. His apartment is empty. He hasn't been there for days. His employer reported he hasn't shown up to work either. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Ryan was gone, and no one knew where he was. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, every creak and whisper of the wind sending a fresh wave of paranoia down my spine. Emily had double-checked every lock before heading to bed, but it didn't ease the unease creeping through me. I sat up, rubbing my temples, trying to convince myself this was all in my head. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something shift outside the window. A shadow. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to move, stepping closer, heart hammering against my ribs. The shadow was gone. Had I imagined it? I shook my head, forcing myself to step back. Maybe it was just exhaustion, paranoia playing tricks on me. I climbed back into bed, closing my eyes. The sound of shattering glass ripped through the silence. I bolted upright. A scream echoed from the other room. Emily. I lunged for the bedside lamp, gripping it tightly in my hands. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body was frozen in terror. Ryan was here, inside the apartment. Ryan stood in the dim light of the apartment, his breath heavy, his eyes wild. His presence sucked the air from the room, filling it with the weight of something dark and inevitable. "You left me, Hannah," he murmured, his voice eerily calm. "But I won't let you forget me." My entire body locked up. Every muscle screamed at me to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. Emily stood behind me, gripping her phone, her knuckles white. "Get out!" she spat, her voice sharp. Ryan ignored her. His gaze was locked on me, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You don't get to walk away," he said, stepping forward. I took a step back. Ryan moved faster. Before I could react, his hand clamped around my wrist, his grip bruising. "If I can't have you," he whispered, his fingers tightening like a vice. "No one will." Panic exploded in my chest. My breath came in shallow gasps, my vision tunneling. But something inside me, something deeper, something stronger, snapped into place. Number not this time. I had spent years shrinking under Ryan's control, molding myself into something smaller, something quieter. I had let fear dictate my choices. But not anymore. I wasn't that woman anymore. I clenched my free hand into a fist and drove my elbow into his ribs as hard as I could. Ryan grunted in pain, stumbling back just enough for me to yank my arm free. My pulse roared in my ears, but my body knew what to do. A sharp kick to his knee sent him staggering, his balance thrown. Emily was shouting something, but I barely heard her over the sound of my own heartbeat. Ryan recovered quickly, his face twisting in rage. "You think you're strong now?" he sneered, his voice venomous. "You think you can fight me?" I planted my feet, my chest heaving. "I know I can." Emily's voice cut through the tension. "The cops are here." The blare of sirens filled the night. Flashing red and blue lights poured through the windows. Ryan's entire body went rigid. His eyes darted toward the door, realization dawning. He had lost. For the first time I saw it. His mask cracking, the weight of his actions sinking in. Two officers burst through the entrance, guns drawn. "Hands where we can see them!" Ryan didn't move at first, but when he finally raised his arms, there was a slight tremble in his hands. I watched as the officers forced him to his knees, handcuffing him. As they pulled him to his feet, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. For years, I had feared this moment, feared what it would take to finally be free. But as I met his gaze one last time, I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no doubt. "You don't control me anymore," I said, my voice steady. The officers led him away, his protests fading into the night. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the morning sun warming my skin. A steaming cup of coffee rested between my palms, the scent of roasted beans filling the crisp air. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. My phone buzzed beside me. A text. "Ethan Collins. Lunch tomorrow. No pressure, just friends." A small smile played on my lips. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the screen for a moment, before I typed out a simple reply. "Tomorrow sounds good." Looking back, I never thought I'd have the strength to walk away. I spent so long convincing myself that sacrificing my happiness for someone else was just part of love, part of marriage. But I was wrong. Love should never make you feel invisible. Love should never strip you of your voice, your home, or your dignity. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing I deserved to. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one has the right to take away your peace. No one gets to dictate your worth. If you ever find yourself questioning whether you should stay in a place that makes you feel small, unheard, or afraid, please remember, you are stronger than you think, and you are never as alone as you feel. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for yourself, even when it felt impossible? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you in any way, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this video, let me know why. I'm always open to different perspectives. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for watching, for being here, and for being part of this conversation. I can't wait to see you in the next story. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and take care. I'm Celine. And I think my husband just tried to poison me. It started with a simple cup of tea, a strange smell, a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. So I switched cups with my sister-in-law. Moments later, she was gasping for breath. And my husband? He wasn't surprised. But that was only the beginning. The missing money, the whispered conversations behind my back, the way my career started crumbling overnight, all while Vesper, his sister, smiled like she already knew how this would end. I thought I was imagining things. I thought I was losing my mind. But the truth? It was so much worse. Sunday brunch at Vesper's estate was a ritual I had never been able to avoid. Alaric insisted it was about family, about keeping peace. But to me, it always felt more like a performance. A carefully curated event where Vesper played the gracious host, and everyone else was expected to fall in line. The house, a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, sat like a fortress against the Chicago skyline. Inside, everything was cold, minimalist art, sharp-edged furniture, and an atmosphere that felt more curated than lived in. I had never felt at home here, even before my suspicions began. Alaric had been quiet on the way over, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. I didn't ask why. We had stopped having those kinds of conversations months ago. As we sat at the long glass dining table, I forced a smile while Vesper did what she always did: command the room. She was effortlessly poised, her presence demanding attention. The kind of woman who could make an insult sound like a compliment. And lately, every glance she threw my way carried something unspoken, something dangerous. I couldn't explain it. Not yet. Alaric reached across the table, setting a cup of tea in front of me with a small, deliberate movement. "You should try this, Celine," he said, his voice steady. "I made it just for you." I hesitated, my fingers brushing the handle. A faint metallic scent curled into my nose, sharp and wrong. It was subtle, something most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Vesper sipped her coffee, watching me with an expression that was almost amused. My stomach tightened. "Drink," Alaric urged, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Something inside me screamed no. I reached for a napkin, faking a small, clumsy movement as it slipped from my fingers. "Oh," I muttered, reaching for it, my free hand shifting the cups just slightly, just enough. When I straightened, I lifted the tea I had switched. Vesper continued to sip her coffee, her attention flitting from me to Alaric like she was gauging something unseen. I lifted the cup toward my lips, pretending to take a sip. And then Vesper's breath hitched. She set her coffee down, her expression flickering, just for a second, before her hand reached toward her throat. A single heartbeat passed, then another. Her face paled. The cup in her hand slipped, crashing against the table with a sharp, shattering sound. Alaric leapt up, knocking over his chair, but the look on his face wasn't shock. It wasn't concern. It was terror. Vesper gasped, one hand clutching at her throat as she stumbled back, knocking against the pristine white tablecloth. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned this, and Alaric wasn't surprised. The realization settled like a cold weight in my chest. My husband knew more than he let on. I lay awake long after Alaric's breathing had evened beside me, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Vesper was in the hospital, yet he hadn't mentioned it to me once. No frantic calls to check on her. No whispered conversations about what had gone wrong. It was as if he had simply chosen to erase the entire event from his mind. But I couldn't erase it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way his face had twisted. Not in shock, not in concern, but in something far worse. He was terrified, but not for Vesper. For himself. By the time the early morning light seeped through the blinds, I had made up my mind. I needed to start looking for answers, and I needed to start at home. Alaric moved through our morning routine as if nothing had happened. He hummed softly while making coffee, scrolled through his phone at the breakfast table, even gave me his usual peck on the cheek before heading to work. It was all so normal, but I wasn't playing along anymore. I poured a cup of coffee, but left it untouched as I reached for my phone. A familiar anxiety crawled up my spine as I opened my banking app, something I rarely did because Alaric handled all our finances. But today, I wasn't looking for reassurance. I was looking for evidence. It didn't take long to find. A large withdrawal. Thousands of dollars. Gone. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled through the transaction history. The money had been moved to an account I didn't recognize, and worse, the withdrawals hadn't just started recently. They had been happening for months. My hands clenched into fists. I tried to keep my breathing steady as I went through every line, every date, every slow, methodical theft from our savings. I thought about the way Alaric had been working late, the way he had started brushing off questions about money, the way he had stopped mentioning certain cases at work. It all clicked into place. By the time Alaric walked through the door that evening, my patience had evaporated. "Where did the money go?" I asked, my voice sharp and steady. He paused in the doorway, his fingers tightening around the strap of his briefcase. "What money?" I held up my phone, the screen glowing with the evidence. "This money, thousands of dollars, Alaric. Where did it go?" His expression barely flickered, but I caught it. The hesitation, the flicker of nerves. He set his briefcase down with an exaggerated sigh, as if I were overreacting. "It's an investment, Celine. I was going to tell you." My stomach twisted. "An investment in what?" Alaric rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. "Something personal, a deal I'm working on." "That's not an answer." I waited. He didn't say anything. The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy, until he finally looked at me. His voice was softer this time, almost pleading. "Trust me." But I didn't. Not anymore. Something bigger was happening here. The tea, his reaction to Vesper, the money. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. It was my entire life, unraveling thread by thread. Alaric exhaled sharply and grabbed his briefcase again. "I have work to do," he muttered, brushing past me toward the office. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of coffee on the table, the scent of roasted beans filling the air. What else had I been blind to? I opened my laptop and took a deep breath. It was time to uncover the truth. The silence of my home felt heavier than usual, pressing in on me like an invisible force. The missing money, the tea, Alaric's hollow reassurances. It was all leading somewhere, but I still didn't know where. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard as I debated my next move. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Banking records? Correspondence between Alaric and Vesper? A trail of evidence leading me to the thing I already knew deep down. Something was terribly wrong. The sharp ping of my phone startled me. I glanced at the screen. A text message. Unknown number. "They're not done with you. Be careful." My stomach dropped. I swallowed hard, gripping my phone tighter as I stared at the message, my mind racing. Who was they? And how did this person know what was happening? I called the number immediately, pressing the phone to my ear. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. A chill crawled down my spine. Someone was watching. Someone new. I stood up abruptly, pacing the living room, my pulse hammering. Was it Vesper? Was this another one of her power plays, a way to keep me unsettled? Or was it someone else, someone who knew more than I did? I took a shaky breath and forced myself to focus. I couldn't afford to lose control now. I had work to do. The next morning, I woke up nauseous. At first, I thought it was stress, the weight of everything finally pressing too hard against me. But as I forced myself out of bed, the dizziness hit. My stomach clenched painfully, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I was on my knees, heaving. The bitter taste of bile coated my mouth as I gripped the sink, my reflection in the mirror pale and drawn. Number not again. The tea. The familiar feeling of my body betraying me. Was it something I ate? Or was it something more sinister? I didn't have time to think. I was supposed to lead a major client presentation today, one that could land my company one of its biggest accounts of the year. I couldn't afford to miss it. I splashed cold water on my face, forced down the nausea, and dressed as quickly as I could. The drive to my office was a blur, every red light feeling like an eternity. By the time I stepped into the lobby, I was still shaky, but at least I was there. Then I saw her. Vesper. Standing in the conference room, smiling. The room was already full, executives seated, the presentation already underway. My presentation. I moved forward, my heels clicking against the marble floor, but before I could reach the door, my boss intercepted me. "Celine," he said, shifting uncomfortably. I didn't think you'd make it in today." I narrowed my eyes. "Why?" He hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the conference room. The client preferred a different approach. Vesper stepped in to handle it. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. She set this up. She knew I wouldn't make it in time, knew I'd be sick, knew this was the perfect moment to swoop in and take what was mine. I pushed past him and stepped into the room, just in time to hear Vesper's closing remarks. The executives around the table nodded in approval, some even smiling. The contract was practically signed. Vesper caught my eye, and there it was. That smirk. The look that said, "You can't stop me. You never could." My nails dug into my palms as my vision blurred with rage. I stormed out of the building, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. Someone was actively sabotaging my life. I clenched my fists, the words barely a whisper. I won't let them win. That night, I sat down with a single thought in mind. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I had spent too long reacting, too long playing defense. Vesper had made her move, and she had won. She stole my deal, manipulated my boss, and left me looking like a fool. But this wasn't over. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. If there was one thing I knew about Vesper, it was that she left a trail. People like her always did. The only question was how deep it went, and whether Alaric was tangled in it more than I already feared. A gust of wind rattled the windows, making the silence of my house feel even heavier. I glanced at my phone, half expecting another anonymous message, another veiled threat. Nothing. But they wouldn't warn me twice. The next morning, I walked to my car, still lost in thought, until I noticed something that stopped me cold. All 4 of my tires, slashed. My pulse pounded as I stepped closer, my heels crunching against broken rubber. A small folded note was tucked under my windshield wiper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. "Let it go before you get hurt." The letters were bold, printed, no signature, no trace of emotion, just a warning. I scanned the empty parking lot, my breath shallow. Someone had been here. Someone had been close enough to do this without being seen. This wasn't a game anymore. I shoved the note into my coat pocket and took a cab to work, my mind already racing toward my next move. I needed someone who could help me navigate this, someone who could find the answers I couldn't. I needed a private investigator. By lunchtime, I was sitting across from Nolan Graves, a man who looked like he had seen too much of the world and didn't care for any of it. He had sharp eyes and a voice that carried no unnecessary words. "This isn't just about my husband," I told him. "This is bigger than that." He leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Then you should know. You might not like what you find." I already knew that. I slid the file I had started compiling across the table. Screenshots, bank statements, emails that felt off, but I hadn't been able to prove were manipulated. Start here. I need to know how deep Alaric is in, and I need to know what Vesper is hiding. He nodded, taking the file. "Give me a day." By the time I got home that evening, Exhaustion tugged at every part of me, but I couldn't rest. Not yet. 24 hours later, Nolan called. "Meet me at my office," he said. "You'll want to see this in person." I arrived within the hour, my stomach in knots. He didn't waste time with small talk. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk. "Alaric isn't just involved," Nolan said. "He's drowning." The papers inside told me everything I needed to know. Debt. A lot of it. Loans I never knew about. Transactions that linked back to companies with ties to Vesper. It wasn't just money disappearing from our accounts. Alaric had been funneling money into something far bigger than I had imagined. And Vesper? She wasn't just watching over him, she was controlling him. My hands tightened around the edges of the folder as my vision blurred with rage. He had lied to me. Over and over again. I walked into our house that night like a woman on a mission. Alaric barely looked up from his drink when I threw the folder onto the table in front of him. "How long have you been lying to me?" My voice was cold, steady. His fingers hovered over the papers, but he didn't touch them. He didn't need to. He already knew what was inside. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, he exhaled. "Celine, Don't," I cut him off. "No excuses. No more lies." He ran a hand through his hair, looking more exhausted than I had ever seen him. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw it. The cracks, the guilt, the fear. But it didn't matter anymore. I stepped back, my voice unwavering. "If you or Vesper come for me again, I promise I'll return the favor." Alaric's face paled. I didn't wait for him to respond. I walked out the door, my hands trembling as I closed it behind me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was furious. The next morning, I called my lawyer. If Alaric wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find another way to make him talk. Sitting across from Margot Hastings, a woman known for dismantling men like Alaric in court, I felt an unsettling mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a quiet, burning resolve. She flipped through the documents Nolan had uncovered, her manicured nails tapping against the desk. When she finally exhaled, the sound was sharp. "This is worse than I expected." I already knew that. Margot slid the papers back toward me. "You want to go through with this?" I reached for the pen without hesitation. "I want him out of my life." As the ink dried on the divorce petition, something inside me shifted. A door had closed. There was no turning back. That night, I walked into our house with a stack of legal papers in my hand. Alaric was in the living room, a half-empty whiskey glass beside him, his tie loosened, his face unreadable. When he saw the documents, his expression didn't change. I dropped them onto the coffee table between us. "Sign them!" He barely glanced at the papers. Instead, his gaze lifted to mine, something dark flickering behind his eyes. "You don't understand what you're doing." A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. "No, Alaric, I finally do." His jaw clenched. "Vesper's not going to let this go." I leaned forward, voice steady. "Neither am I." The next day, the war became official. Vesper orchestrated a family meeting, as if this was some domestic dispute instead of the calculated sabotage she had spent months perfecting. I arrived at her penthouse, greeted by a staff of assistants who acted as if this were a casual gathering rather than a battlefield. Alaric was already there, standing beside her. His posture was stiff, his face unreadable. Vesper sipped from a delicate glass of red wine, her smile the picture of amusement. "You're making a mistake, Celine." I held her gaze. "So are you." Her smirk didn't falter. "You think you can just walk away from this? That I'll let you destroy everything I've built?" I tilted my head. "You think I'm the one destroying things?" Alaric cleared his throat, his voice tight. "Both of you need to stop." Vesper turned to him, eyes narrowing. "Oh, Alaric, don't act like you're some innocent bystander. You made your choices." His composure cracked, frustration flashing across his face. "You both act like I have a choice, but neither of you understands what it means to lose everything." I stared at him. the weight of his words sinking in. He was already lost. Vesper stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel intimate, threatening. "You're fighting a battle you can't win, Celine." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "We'll see about that." As I turned to leave, her voice followed me. "You should have listened when you had the chance." I walked out without looking back. Vesper wasn't bluffing. Something bigger was coming. The next morning, I found out just how far Vesper was willing to go to destroy me. I woke up feeling different. Lighter. As if, for the first time in months, I had taken back a sliver of control. Filing for divorce had been a battle cry, a declaration that I wouldn't be manipulated anymore. But that didn't mean I was safe. A part of me expected retaliation. Vesper was too calculated to let my defiance go unanswered. Alaric was too tangled in her web to walk away without a fight. Still, I had no idea what form their next move would take. I found out soon enough. A few hours into my morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Celine Bennett?" a woman's voice asked, sharp but controlled. I frowned. "Who's asking?" "My name is Claire Renford," she said. "I need to speak with you. It's about Vesper." I stiffened. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone," Claire interrupted. "Meet me at the Riverton Cafe in an hour. You'll want to hear what I have to say." The line went dead. My hands tightened around the phone. Whoever she was, she knew something. And if she was calling me now, it meant Vesper had hurt her too. An hour later, I stepped into the cafe, scanning the tables until I spotted a woman sitting alone near the window. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, her blazer pressed to perfection, but the tension in her posture gave her away. She was waiting for a fight. "Celine," she greeted, motioning for me to sit. I slid into the chair opposite her, folding my hands on the table. "You said you had something to tell me." Claire exhaled slowly, her fingers tapping against her cup. "You're not the first one she's done this to." A chill crept up my spine. She continued, her voice lowering. 5 years ago, I was a senior executive at a top firm. I was good at my job, too good. Vesper saw me as competition. At first, it was small things, a stolen client, a missed promotion. Then it escalated. I swallowed. "What happened?" Claire's jaw tightened. "She framed me for fraud." The words hit like a slap. "She planted fabricated documents under my name," she explained. "I was discredited, blacklisted. My reputation was destroyed overnight. By the time I cleared my name, it was too late. No firm would touch me." I shook my head, my pulse hammering. "And now she's trying to do the same to me." Claire nodded. "She plays the long game. She doesn't just want to win, she wants to ruin you." The weight of her words settled over me, suffocating. I had thought this was about Alaric, about business, about revenge. But Vesper wasn't just a corporate shark, she was a predator. I leaned forward. "Why are you telling me this now?" A humorless smile crossed Claire's lips. "Because you're the first person who's ever fought back." Something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about ending her. I pushed my coffee aside. "We take her down, together." Claire studied me for a moment before nodding. "Agreed." But as I stepped out of the cafe, a cold certainty settled in my chest. If Vesper found out what we were planning, she wouldn't hesitate to escalate. Celine clenched her fists. If Vesper thought she could destroy her, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I had played defense for too long. Now it was time to go on the offensive. Sitting across from Claire in my apartment, I spread the files across the table. Pages filled with transactions, contracts, and whispers of destruction. Lives that Vesper had dismantled without a second thought. "We have enough," Claire murmured, scanning the documents. "But we need something that ties it all together, something undeniable." I nodded, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug. Vesper was too powerful to take down with speculation. I needed hard, irrefutable proof. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Nolan Graves. "I've got something for you," he said, voice clipped. "And trust me, you're going to want to see it in person." I met him an hour later in his office. He slid a single folder across the desk. "This," he said, "is what Vesper doesn't want anyone to find." My pulse pounded as I flipped it open. The first page alone made my stomach drop. A missing persons case. A man who had vanished years ago. The deeper I read, the clearer it became. He wasn't just anyone. He was someone who had gotten in Vesper's way. Someone who had threatened her power. And now, he was gone. A sick realization settled over me. Vesper didn't just ruin careers. She erased people. I exhaled shakily, my hands gripping the pages. "This is it," I whispered. "This is what will take her down." But before I could act, Vesper made her move. The next morning, the headlines hit like a wrecking ball. Celine Bennett, a dangerous manipulator. Former employees speak out. Is she unstable? Hidden scandals, the dark side of a rising star. Every article was crafted to smear my name. Fake accusations, distorted truths, carefully planted whispers meant to unravel my reputation overnight. My inbox flooded. Clients withdrew contracts. My boss called, his voice uneasy, telling me to stay away from the office until this blows over. I had expected retaliation. But this? This was war. Claire stormed into my apartment hours later, phone in hand. She just made the biggest mistake of her life. I lifted my gaze. "What do you mean?" "She got sloppy," Claire said, shoving her phone toward me. "Look at this." I read the messages on the screen, leaked emails, conversations between Vesper and a journalist, instructions to fabricate the articles, proof that every word written about me was a lie orchestrated by her. A slow smile formed on my lips. She had tried to destroy me, and now I had everything I needed to destroy her. I spent the next 24 hours carefully crafting my next move. By morning, I sent the files to one journalist I trusted, someone I knew Vesper couldn't buy. And then I waited. It didn't take long. By noon, the internet exploded with a new wave of headlines. Vesper Bennett exposed. A trail of manipulation and ruined lives. Fraud, lies, and power. The woman behind the curtain. Breaking, new evidence links. Vesper Bennett to a missing persons case. The tides had turned, but Vesper wasn't finished. That afternoon, a courier arrived at my door with an envelope. A legal summons. I was being sued for defamation. I let out a breath, staring at the papers in my hands. This was it. The final battle. I straightened my blazer and walked into the courthouse. It was time to end this once and for all. The cameras flashed as I stepped forward. The world was watching now. I adjusted my blazer, forcing my shoulders back, exuding confidence I wasn't sure I felt. The weight of the trial pressed against my chest like a physical force, but I refused to let it show. The courthouse steps were crowded with journalists, microphones shoved toward my face, voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus. "Celine, how do you respond to the claims against you? Did you fabricate evidence against Vesper Bennett? Are you out for revenge?" I didn't stop. I didn't respond. That was what Vesper wanted, for me to react emotionally, to crack under pressure. Not today. Inside, the courtroom was already buzzing. Vesper sat across the aisle, her usual poise intact, her smirk a mask of confidence. But I knew better. She was unraveling. Alaric sat in the gallery, shoulders tense, his face unreadable. He had spent so long pretending to be neutral, avoiding the consequences of his choices. But neutrality was no longer an option. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. All rise. I exhaled slowly as the trial began. Vesper's attorney went first. A man with sharp features and a voice polished from years of discrediting people like me. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," he began, his tone smooth, rehearsed. "What we have here is a bitter woman, Someone who has been outmaneuvered in business and in life, and now seeks to destroy the one person who has always outshone her. He gestured toward Vesper, who lowered her gaze, feigning humility. Celine Bennett has fabricated accusations in a desperate attempt to bring my client down. But the truth is, Vesper Bennett is a successful, respected businesswoman, and these claims are nothing more than a jealous vendetta. I clenched my jaw. Every word was carefully crafted, designed to make me look unstable, vengeful. Then it was my attorney's turn. Margot Hastings stood, adjusting the cuffs of her jacket before stepping toward the jury. "Let's talk about truth," she began, her voice measured but powerful. "Because today, that's all that matters." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we are not here because my client is vengeful. We are here because of a calculated, deliberate effort to destroy her life. We will present evidence, undeniable proof, of financial fraud, sabotage, and manipulation that spans years. What we are about to reveal will show you exactly who Vesper Bennett really is." The tension in the room thickened. Then, Margot called her first witness, Claire Renford. I watched as Claire walked to the stand, her movements controlled, her expression unreadable. But when she faced the courtroom, her voice was unwavering. "For years, I believed I had been careless," she began, "that I had made mistakes, that my career collapsed because of my own failures." She glanced at Vesper, her eyes narrowing. "But I was wrong. I wasn't careless. I wasn't reckless. I was targeted." She detailed everything. How Vesper manipulated key players in the industry to isolate her. How fabricated evidence destroyed her career. How she was blacklisted. The jury leaned in, absorbing every word. Then Margot handed Claire a file. "Can you confirm the contents of this document?" Claire nodded, her fingers tightening around the pages. "These are emails, bank statements, communications between Vesper Bennett and my former employers, detailing a systematic effort to sabotage my career." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vesper's smirk finally wavered. Then came the final blow. Margot approached the judge's bench and handed over a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, we have one last piece of evidence." The judge opened it, scanning the contents before his expression hardened. Margot turned to the courtroom. "These are messages between Vesper Bennett and Alaric Bennett, discussing the targeted sabotage of my client's career. In these messages, we see not only intent to discredit her, but discussions about how to ensure she was out of the way, physically." Gasps erupted. Alaric stiffened. Every eye in the room turned to him. Vesper's nails dug into the table, her mask cracking. "This is ridiculous," she hissed under her breath. But it was too late. The judge's gavel struck. "Order in the court!" And just like that, the tide shifted. The jury deliberated for only an hour. When they returned, the verdict was swift. Guilty. On multiple counts of fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. Vesper didn't flinch as the sentence was read. But when the bailiffs approached, her composure broke. As they placed cuffs around her wrists, she turned toward me, her voice a venomous whisper. "You'll regret this." I met her gaze, my own voice steady. "No, Vesper, I won't." She was led away. And just like that, her empire crumbled. The weight on my chest lifted as I stepped outside, the sunlight warm against my skin. For the first time in years, I was free. But what came next? The battle was won, but healing would take time. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to start again. The television flickered in the corner of my apartment, the news anchor's voice droning over footage of Vesper being escorted from the courthouse. Vesper Bennett, once a titan of the corporate world, now faces multiple charges of fraud, conspiracy, and defamation. Sources say her legal team is scrambling for leniency, but experts predict a severe sentencing. I turned away from the screen, barely listening. I didn't need the world to tell me that Vesper had lost. I had seen it in her eyes when they took her away, the moment she realized she was no longer untouchable. Alaric had disappeared from the public eye. His law firm had distanced itself from him, his reputation irreparably tarnished. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. I had spent months fighting, clawing my way out of a war I never asked for. And now that it was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. The knock at my door came late that evening. I opened it without thinking, and there he was. Alaric. His once pristine suits were gone, replaced by something wrinkled and disheveled. He looked like a man who had been unraveling for weeks. "I didn't know how deep I was in until it was too late," he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't step aside to let him in. "You knew enough," I replied. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his unkempt hair. "I thought I could fix it. That if I kept Vesper happy, kept her in control, I could find a way out." He swallowed hard. I was wrong. I wanted to feel something for him, pity, sadness, nostalgia for the man I once thought I knew. But there was nothing left. "I don't hate you, Alaric," I said, "but I don't forgive you either." His shoulders sagged, like he had been holding on to some desperate hope that I would absolve him. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. I closed the door. The next morning, I met Margot at her office to sign the final divorce papers. As the ink dried, I felt something shift inside me. A weight lifting, a door finally, permanently closed. It was over. Later that afternoon, I met Claire at a small cafe by the river. We sat outside, the autumn breeze curling around us, warm coffee cups in hand. "We finally won, didn't we?" she asked, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. I thought about it for a moment. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. She nodded. "Because it's not about them, it's about us. We survived." That, at least, was something. Before we left, Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a crisp white envelope. "A recruiter sent this to me," she said, sliding it across the table. "I think it was meant for you." I frowned, picking it up. Inside was a letter from Harrison and Cole, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the country. "Celine Bennett, we would like to extend an offer to lead our next major campaign. Your reputation for resilience, innovation, and strategic leadership speaks for itself. We hope to discuss this opportunity further." I read it twice, then a third time. "Looks like you have a future to get back to," Claire said with a small smile. I took a deep breath. Maybe this was the fresh start I needed. That night, I walked through the city, the glow of streetlights reflecting off the pavement. For the first time in years, I felt free. I wasn't running anymore. I whispered to myself, "I'm not looking back." Then I stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. Because this time, I was in control of my own story. As I step forward into this new chapter of my life, I can't help but look back at everything that has led me here. The betrayals, the battles, the heartbreak, it all forced me to become someone stronger than I ever thought I could be. And if there's one lesson I've learned, it's this: your power is yours alone. Never let anyone take it from you. For too long, I let others define my worth. I trusted people who didn't deserve it, gave second chances to those who had already burned me. But here's the truth. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Vesper's game wasn't just about winning, it was about control. And Alaric? He made the mistake of thinking that standing still was the same as standing strong. In the end, both of them fell, not because I sought revenge, but because the truth has a way of catching up with those who try to bury it. Maybe you've faced your own Vesper. Maybe you've had someone try to take everything from you. Your career, your confidence, your voice. Maybe you're still in that fight. If you are, let this be your reminder. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to play small. You are stronger than they think. But what about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation? Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Press 1 if this video resonated with you, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't enjoy this, tell me why. I'm always open to learning from your perspective. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories of resilience, justice, and redemption, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's always another story to tell, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. See you in the next one.